You feel pain like no other pain. And you know that in your life, it's going to be very difficult to come across something that's going to be even worse pain than that. But it also brings you so close to all those other people out there who have been bereaved.
The scene outside Kensington Palace flipped from celebration to total confusion in an instant. Prince William, Britain's future king, abruptly cancelled his highly anticipated public appearance. Just moments after distressing family news reached him behind closed doors, staff scrambled for phones while reporters raced for answers. The royal convoy, gone. Poof, vanished. Was it a sudden health scare? A shocking revelation inside the royal household? Or something far deeper, shaking the very foundation of the monarchy itself? Whispers rippled like wildfire, hearts felt heavy, and nobody could explain why William vanished from the public eye. What had started as a morning meant for hope and charity, a meticulously planned event on his calendar for months, rehearsed down to the last second and broadcast as a symbol of royal duty, suddenly became clouded in secrecy. Beneath the polished surface of Kensington Palace, tension crept like shadow through marble halls. Conversations faltered, silences stretched, and those closest to the heir sensed that something profoundly wrong had erupted. Chaos overtook confusion when word spread that William had withdrawn from his appearance without warning. Reporters gathered outside the gates looked on in disbelief. Staff moved with urgent precision, faces tight, words clipped. The announcement itself? Brief. Too brief. Unforeseen personal circumstances. Just 2 words that spoke volumes. And yet said almost nothing for a family whose very image is built on stability. This wasn't just a missing face at a public event. It was a warning from behind palace walls. Rumours whispered of rising tensions within the royal household. King Charles's ongoing health issues had already cast long shadows, while Princess Kate's recovery forced the family to huddle tightly, limiting public exposure. But William's sudden disappearance, it felt entirely different. It wasn't a calculated strategy. It was strain. Palace insiders said the air had shifted. Calm, routine meetings became clipped, cold and sharp. Usually a steady hand in turbulent times, William appeared distracted, uneasy, and deeply concerned in the days leading up to the cancellation. Something, or someone, had shaken him to his core. Rumours spread like wildfire, urgent calls, private discussions behind heavy doors, and whispers of a growing rift between duty and family. Some speculated new revelations about past royal scandals had reached the inner circle. Others pointed to the immense stress of succession, with public expectations now almost entirely resting on William's shoulders. Inside the palace, staff moved like they were walking on glass. Instructions whispered, schedules erased, events quietly postponed. No official statement followed. Just a heavy silence that made every theory outside Britain roar louder. Royal footage and old correspondence were reviewed endlessly, searching for signs, clues, anything they might have missed in the past. Anything that could hint at the storm now brewing behind those grand palace walls. A glance, a hesitation, a nervous shift. Small signs, but glaring. During recent public appearances, the image of Prince William stepping back so suddenly was almost unthinkable. He had always been the steady centre of a fragile monarchy, calm where others faltered. But on that fateful morning, the carefully maintained facade cracked. Cameras stayed trained on the palace gates, yet the man at the heart of it all was nowhere to be seen. Something inside those royal walls had shifted, something powerful enough to silence the palace, halt appearances, and leave an entire nation desperate to know what the crown was desperately trying to hide. How could a single morning unravel centuries of control, leaving royal watchers, aides, and insiders questioning everything they thought they knew? What secret force had brought silence to the throne? Keep watching. The pressure behind the palace walls was intensifying. Just days before the abrupt cancellation, life inside Kensington Palace seemed flawless. Prince William appeared radiant, standing tall among dignitaries at a London community event, the very image of composure, determination, and purpose cameras adored. Commentators praised him as a man seamlessly stepping into his father's shoes, embodying calm continuity and poised leadership. To the public, it looked like another flawless day of royal service. But behind those polished smiles, a quiet unease had begun to take root, subtle but undeniable. Those closest to the prince would later recall moments that seemed almost trivial at the time, but in hindsight, spoke volumes. A distant stare, a fleeting silence, a pause mid-conversation, a strange stillness as he stepped from his car. He was present in body, but somewhere else in thought, carrying a weight no amount of royal duty could ever disguise. Inside the palace, aides began noticing the shift. Meetings, once filled with polite chatter, had become tense, clipped, and unusually short, leaving staff unsettled. The prince's normally tight schedule began to twist. Some appointments quietly vanished, others postponed with little explanation. Behind the scenes, whispers spread of private discussions with senior advisors and discreet visits to King Charles himself. The king's health had become a delicate, hushed topic, spoken only among those trusted enough to know the truth. Official statements claimed his condition was manageable, yet insiders revealed his recovery was slower and more complicated than publicly acknowledged. Each medical update seemed to bring fresh anxiety, not just for the monarch, but for the son who would one day inherit the crown and shoulder responsibilities far heavier than the public could imagine. The crown was no longer a distant destiny. It had become immediate, tangible, and pressing. In recent months, the balance of royal duty had shifted dramatically. With King Charles stepping back from key appearances, the weight of representation had landed squarely on William's shoulders. He was expected everywhere: charity events, diplomatic meetings, state ceremonies, while also standing at his father's side, privately handling delicate matters that few outside the palace walls could even imagine. The pressure was relentless, and the expectation unyielding behind closed doors. Discussions about succession planning had grown urgent, with advisors debating protocols, logistics, and the quiet, unspoken realities of leadership in uncertain times. These were conversations no son wants to have about his father, yet they were unavoidable and utterly draining. Even the Duchess of Cambridge could feel the weight pressing in on her. The symbol of grace had grown quieter in recent weeks. Her smiles remained warm, but they hid exhaustion. Those who saw her in person described her as distant, present in body but lost in thought. Every smile was measured, every glance cautious. As her husband's growing unease quietly became her own burden, the palace maintained its perfect silence, polished and impenetrable. Official statements stayed brief, polished and detached, giving the public only what they were meant to see: a strong, stable monarchy. But behind the palace gates, a storm was gathering. The king's fragile health, the looming weight of succession, and the unrelenting strain of royal expectation had merged into one suffocating pressure. When the breaking moment came, the sudden cancellation that sent reporters into a frenzy, it was more than a missing face at an event. It was a visible crack in an institution struggling to stay upright. For Prince William, it was the day when the shield of duty collided with the harsh weight of reality, revealing strains long hidden behind those polished walls. But how did whispers within those royal halls grow into a storm so powerful? They forced the future king to vanish. Stay tuned. The whispers inside the palace were loud, tense, and impossible to ignore. The cancellation sent tremors through the monarchy, but the tension had been simmering for weeks. Behind the polished facade of Kensington Palace, murmurs of unease had grown sharper, tied not just to the king's fragile health, but to growing friction among key figures in the royal household. What once seemed like minor family disagreements now looked far more serious. At the centre of it all stood Prince William, caught between duty, conscience, and quiet storms swirling within his own family. In the days before his cancelled appearance, sources described a palace under mounting pressure. Staff moved briskly through halls once filled with laughter, their clipped tones and lowered voices signalling that something was deeply wrong. The king, still recovering and advised to limit his workload, had become increasingly reliant on those around him. But that reliance, insiders say, fueled friction, especially between senior courtiers and Queen Camilla's circle. Camilla's growing influence in palace decisions had quietly become a flashpoint, adding yet another layer of strain to an already tense household. Her role, once seen as purely supportive, was now viewed by some within the royal establishment as overreaching. Reports surfaced of subtle disagreements over public appearances, internal protocols, and the handling of sensitive family matters. Standing at the centre of this delicate power balance was her son, Tom Parker Bowles, a respected figure in his own right, but one whose close proximity to the Queen Consort had drawn fresh scrutiny. Some within the palace reportedly questioned how much influence he wielded in matters extending beyond his mother's personal affairs. For Prince William, who had spent decades preparing for his future role as king, the situation had grown increasingly difficult to navigate. His father's fragile health had already placed the weight of leadership prematurely on his shoulders. Now, he also faced the challenge of keeping a divided household in line. Every decision, every step, every word was under a microscope. The need to protect the monarchy's image was constant, yet the truth behind palace doors was growing impossible to contain. Those who know the prince well describe him as deeply loyal, a man driven by duty, but also by a fierce desire to preserve his family's dignity. Even he, however, was said to have reached a breaking point. Meetings that were once routine turned tense, communications between officers stalled, and friction bubbled in the week leading up to his withdrawal. He reportedly spent long hours in private meetings, some with senior advisors, others in quiet conversations with his father. By the morning of the cancelled event, the strain had become impossible to disguise. The official statement? A private family matter. It offered no real answers. Behind those words, however, lay days of internal discussion, rising frustration and emotional exhaustion. The palace's silence was deliberate, calculated to protect the family's fragile balance. But within Kensington and Clarence House, the atmosphere was described as electric. Every phone call heavy with significance, every word carefully measured before reaching the public. To outsiders, it was a mystery. To those inside the royal circle, it was the inevitable eruption of tensions long held in check. The king's health, the queen consort's influence, and the growing burden on the heir had collided into a moment no one could fully manage. As the world waited for answers, the future king disappeared from view. Not out of weakness, but out of necessity. Because sometimes, in the shadow of the crown, silence isn't avoidance, it's survival. And what if the silence surrounding Prince William isn't grief at all, but a storm of power, loyalty, and hidden truths waiting to explode? Stay with us, the breaking point of a future king. As the outside world spun with rumours and restless speculation, inside the quiet walls of Kensington Palace, the air had grown unbearably heavy. So heavy that even the marble floors seemed to hold their breath. What began as another ordinary morning of royal routine quickly spiraled into one of the most unsettling days in recent palace memory. Behind the perfectly arranged portraits and gleaming corridors, something had fractured the rhythm of royal order. The rehearsed calm, the precise timing, all fell apart. Phones buzzed incessantly in the distance, each tone cutting through the tension. Voices that were usually confident and clipped now carried an unmistakable tremor. Senior aides, trained for years to remain composed under pressure, moved with visible unease. It was clear that something serious had unfolded, something far beyond the usual scheduling of speeches, ceremonies, or public appearances. Prince William's private secretary paced the corridor, his tone betraying urgency, while the Duchess of Cambridge, though unseen by most, was reportedly nearby, her calm presence quietly anchoring a day spinning dangerously out of control. Guards outside straightened, as if aware that the stillness inside carried a different kind of weight, a human one. Behind closed doors, an urgent meeting was convened in one of the palace's private drawing rooms. The air hung heavy with quiet dread around the ornate oak table. Senior aides, advisors, and confidants gathered, each fully aware that what they were about to hear would ripple far beyond those walls. A royal messenger arrived with news so sensitive, so deeply personal, that even among the inner circle, few were permitted the full truth. Prince William took the call himself. Witnesses later described the silence that followed. He spoke little, listened intently, and when it ended, remained motionless for several long minutes, his gaze fixed on the gardens below. That stillness, they said, spoke louder than any words ever could. For a man trained to balance duty and emotion with unshakable precision, the weight of that single call was clearly visible. Even though the reason behind it remained unknown to those around him, it was then that the decision was made. The Prince of Wales would withdraw from his public engagement, not out of defiance, but out of necessity. Something deeply human within those palace walls had taken precedence over royal duty. The official statement that followed was brief, polished, and deliberately vague. The Prince of Wales will no longer attend today's engagement due to a private family matter. Behind those carefully chosen words lay a truth far too fragile to expose. The king's health had already stirred quiet concern, The burden of succession weighed heavily on the prince's shoulders, and yet there were deeper layers at play: complex family dynamics, emotional exhaustion, and the mounting pressures of leadership in a moment when the monarchy's stability seemed to hang on every single move he made. Even the polished halls of Kensington Palace, filled with history and tradition, could not mask the human fragility at the heart of royal life that day. The balance of duty, family, and personal strain had collided, leaving a future king to face a truth no statement could fully capture. As the day dragged on, the palace sank into an eerie, almost unnatural quiet. Meals went untouched, staff avoided eye contact, and even the sound of footsteps seemed subdued. Outside, the world waited for an answer that would never come. Inside, a future king wrestled with the heaviest truth of all, that even in a life built on duty, there are moments when the crown must wait and the man must grieve. Did that silence conceal heartbreak? Or a secret so deep it could shake the crown itself? By late afternoon, the atmosphere inside Buckingham Palace was tense, heavy, and strangely hollow, as if every corridor carried whispers no one dared speak aloud. For days, the public had wondered why Prince William, the steady face of modern royalty, the poised hand of the future monarchy, had suddenly withdrawn. Appearances cancelled, state meetings missed, silence where confidence once reigned. The press filled the vacuum with wild speculation, but the truth was unfolding behind closed doors in a world few would ever see. Inside those gilded walls, the royal family faced a collision of private crises and public pressures that no crown could disguise. The devastating phone call that reached Prince William earlier that week became the breaking point, a moment fracturing the fragile balance between duty and family. A senior royal relative, deeply cherished, had fallen gravely ill. The news didn't arrive through palace communications, but via a trusted physician, one whose decades of loyalty carried weight. The words were simple but final, and in that instant, the future king was not a royal, not a leader, but a son and a brother standing at the edge of grief. Yet that was only part of the storm. The palace itself had become a battlefield of quiet tension. Behind the polished routine, deeper fractures were showing. The king's ongoing health struggles weighed on every royal plan. Advisors spoke in measured tones, but their concern was unmistakable. The monarch's reduced public presence left William and his father's court juggling responsibility between tradition and uncertainty. Add to that the lingering strain with Prince Harry, whose memoir and media appearances had reopened family wounds, and the atmosphere inside the palace grew more fragile by the day. Even Queen Camilla, often the quiet anchor in moments of unrest, was visibly exhausted, stretched between supporting her husband and maintaining appearances before a watchful world. Staff whispered of hushed meetings, abrupt changes to the royal diary, and a pervasive sense of unease. Every engagement, every element of the royal machine, polished and rehearsed for decades, suddenly showed cracks. For Prince William, the pressure was suffocating. He had inherited not only his father's role as heir, but the emotional burden of holding a fractured family together under global scrutiny. Each cancelled appearance carried a story, not of negligence, but of human limits tested to their breaking point. But out of necessity, he could not deliver cheerful speeches when the weight of personal loss pressed on every word. He could not face cameras while wondering if his family's private struggles would once again become public entertainment. And so he withdrew quietly, deliberately, leaving the royal diary blank behind the palace gates. He spent long hours with those closest to him, trying to manage grief and duty, two forces that refused to coexist. Those who saw him described a man torn between roles, a prince bound by protocol and a son desperate to protect whatever remained of normalcy. For now, the monarchy balanced on the edge of endurance and unravelling, and in the centre of it all, Prince William bore the silent weight of it, the heir apparent. Carrying not only the expectations of a nation, but the private heartbreak of a family in turmoil, he faced a test few could imagine. What hidden truth inside the palace could break centuries of silence and challenge the monarchy's strength to its very core? As unease turned into a national obsession, the gates of Kensington Palace stayed firmly closed, and Britain found itself caught in a storm of questions with no answers. Every news channel repeated the same chilling announcement. Prince William had cancelled all forthcoming engagements due to a private family matter, yet it was the absence of detail that made it unbearable. Behind the crisp wording lay a silence heavy enough to rattle an entire nation. Television anchors spoke in subdued tones, eyes scanning for meaning between the lines. Analysts replayed clips of the prince's recent appearances, studying his posture, his smile, his pauses. Was he troubled? Was this the calm before a deeper storm? Even the faintest expression became a headline outside royal residences. Camera crews huddled in the cold, waiting for any flicker of movement. The usual palace rhythm, staff entering and leaving, couriers arriving, had slowed to a crawl. The world's most photographed family had vanished from sight. Then social media erupted. Within hours, the hashtag #PrayForWilliam surged to the top of trending lists. Millions of messages poured in from every corner of the globe. Sympathy, worry, speculation intertwined. Some claimed the king's health had taken a serious turn. Others whispered about internal disputes and hidden tensions among the royals. The lack of information only fueled the frenzy. Silence had become a story in itself, a blank page. The public was left to fill it with fear. Reporters stationed outside Windsor Castle described the mood as eerie. Guards, usually stoic, now appeared tense, their eyes scanning crowds that grew by the hour. One veteran journalist, accustomed to the controlled elegance of palace life, quietly remarked, "This isn't protocol. This is panic inside Parliament." Questions began to stir immediately. Some MPs called for patience and privacy, while others admitted alarm that the heir to the throne had vanished from duty without explanation. By midweek, international broadcasters from New York to Paris had joined the chorus. Royal correspondents speculated about the constitutional implications if the prince's absence stretched even further. Every photo, every convoy, every fleeting movement from the palace gates was scrutinized like evidence in a mystery. Then late one evening, a blurry image emerged. A dark vehicle entering a secluded Norfolk estate believed to belong to the royals. The photograph revealed nothing and everything at once. It confirmed that something was unfolding quietly, urgently, far from public eyes. The palace's response remained firm and coldly professional. No further comment at this time. But behind those words, tension hung thick enough to taste. Those close to the family hinted the situation was deeply personal, possibly tied to health concerns within the inner circle. The emotional strain on Prince William, already carrying the crushing burden of leadership, was said to be immense. As days passed with no new statement, the world's eyes remained fixed on those locked gates. Britain waited, breath held, for an answer that refused to come. And for a prince whose silence had become louder than any speech he had ever given, the pressure only grew. Could the silence be hiding the royal family's deepest secret, one powerful enough to shake the crown itself? Keep watching, a crown tested by silence. As days turned into weeks, the stillness around Kensington Palace grew heavier. Yet within that silence, something profound was quietly taking shape. The turbulence that had shaken the royal household was no longer simply about a family in crisis. It had become a moment that could redefine the monarchy itself. Inside those guarded walls, Prince William faced what may be the greatest test of his life, the collision of personal pain and public expectation. Discussions inside the palace carried a tone unlike any before. Senior advisors, normally calm and rehearsed, now spoke with unease about the mounting strain on the prince. Every decision, every word, every cancelled appearance carried enormous weight. It wasn't about duty alone anymore. It was about preserving the fragile balance between monarchy and manhood. For William, the challenge was not just to lead, but to feel, to grieve, and still stand upright beneath the crown's relentless gaze. Those close to him described a man withdrawn, yet deeply reflective, a future king walking through a storm of emotion with quiet resolve. Gone was the easy confidence that had long defined his public image. In its place stood a figure tempered by responsibility, one who understood that leadership sometimes means stepping back to protect what cannot be repaired in the public eye. The recent chaos within the palace, whispers of health concerns, family tension and internal disagreements, had forced Prince William to confront the same haunting question every monarch faces. How much of oneself must be sacrificed for the sake of the crown, behind closed doors? The tone inside Kensington Palace was somber. The royal family's once unshakable rhythm had slowed. Meetings were postponed, correspondence delayed, and even the corridors themselves seemed to carry an air of uncertainty. Catherine, poised as ever, became the steadying force beside her husband. Her calm demeanour and unspoken strength reminded the world that true resilience often appears not in words, but in quiet presence. Together, they carried the immense weight of family sorrow and national expectation, the impossible balance between heartbreak and heritage. The strain was not only emotional. Growing concerns about the monarchy's public image intensified the pressure. Public trust, always delicate, now rested on how Prince William would navigate this defining chapter of his life. Some aides believed silence was their strongest shield, a way to protect the family from prying eyes. Others feared it only fueled public curiosity, creating more speculation. Yet through it all, William remained firm, choosing family over formality, compassion over ceremony. It was a decision that revealed not weakness, but humanity, and quietly demonstrated what it means to be a leader in crisis. As the press continued to speculate and headlines grew more frantic, the palace finally broke its silence with a single, carefully crafted statement, brief, calm, and deliberate. It thanked the public for their patience and understanding, yet its simplicity spoke louder than any lengthy explanation ever could. There was no denial, no clarification, only restraint. It was a message carrying both grace and grief, a silent acknowledgement that beneath the crown lies a family bound by the same pain that touches every human heart. In those few words, the world saw not authority, but vulnerability. In Prince William's quiet absence, a profound truth emerged. Duty, no matter how sacred, loses meaning without empathy, compassion, and the courage to be human, even when the world is watching. By then, Britain had begun to sense the truth. This was not a scandal. It was not politics. It was a moment of transformation, laying bare the humanity behind the monarchy for the heir to the throne. This silence became his proving ground, a crucible in which grief and leadership collided. The world had expected a prince to lead with poise. Instead, it found a man leading through pain, and perhaps, in that fragile balance between crown and compassion, the future of the monarchy had found its most honest reflection yet. So what really drove Prince William to step back? Was it duty, grief, or something far deeper the palace dares not reveal? Share your thoughts below and join the conversation. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more royal revelations, insider insights, and the untold stories behind the crown.